Why is the so?
See, this specific duck, he was a bad duck. You see, he was a long life Ohio State Buckeye fan, and with a lot of training and a lot of beating into him, he became Oregon's biggest supporter. Let's go Ducks! Ain't that right?
Oh my goodness.
There we go. All right.
Some good hijinks there. Taekwon Lewis forced to pay off a bet with DeForest Buckner of the Colts. That bring back some memories for you?
It does, and hey, maybe it comes full circle for the Buckeyes because my rookie year in Denver, they do the rookie haircuts, and Jeff Hireman, the Ohio State tight end, he shaved a block O in the back of my head, and my record versus Ohio State, which is not pretty. Like you said, this is what we love about college sports, right? The spirit, the emotion. Sometimes you're on the right side. Sometimes you're on the wrong side.
Lewis's team will try to bounce back this week. They've got a game against Nebraska. The Huskers coming off just a rough loss to Indiana. I mean, as thorough a beatdown as you can possibly experience. So both of these teams trying to bounce back. What are you most interested in seeing here?
The response. And Coach Harbaugh would always say when we'd lose games, he'd say it in the locker room right after the loss, and he would say, somebody has to pay, okay? Like the remedy for a loss, he'd say the medicine is on the field to go get a win. Somebody has to pay. And I think for Ohio State, expectations are kind of a double-edged sword, and I was really curious to see what happens if they did lose a game, because we spent all offseason talking about it's the most talented roster in this century, and wouldn't have surprised anyone for them to have gone undefeated and won a national title, and they lose a heartbreaker by 1 point on the road. This is a veteran team that has experienced these losses before. I'm excited to see the emotions of the Buckeyes when they take the field. I'm looking at the trenches for them as well, and I felt specifically on the defensive side of the ball, Ryan Day and his presser almost like challenged Jim Knowles a little bit for that D-line to be as dominant as they had been all year and to not only really not get a sack on Gabriel, they didn't touch him. That they're too good for that to ever be the case in a big game. So I think that's the game plan. And the same thing that Joel said, the Buckeyes commit to running the ball. I mean, gosh, that backfield is so talented. The offensive line has been playing great. They got to commit to running the ball. And for Nebraska, it's the exact same thing. Tony White, it's a big week for him. Ohio State runs a very similar offense to the Hoosiers. So you'd say, great, well, you got to experience it a little bit last week, except for the results of the game, right? So maybe not so great. But I feel for Tony White, that is much more the outlier than a need for me to change my perception of that defense.
It's fascinating to see the way that Indiana ran them over. I mean, you think about this defense, they forced one punt. They had allowed 68 points in their first 6 games, and they give up 56 to Indiana. And I guess what you're trying to convince your guys is that it is an outlier, right? But the issue is that you're coming up against equally as potent in offense. You just hate to see all of the good things that have happened at Nebraska kind of be called into question here, but the timing's really, really bad. And can you kind of get your feet back under you? Can you play well, maybe pull off a stunning upset? But even if you just play well in this game, that sets you up then. You got to make a bowl. You got to figure out a way to win a game here or two down the stretch. And that's where I think the challenge is here for Matt Rule.
That's a challenge, yeah, exactly. For Matt Rule, like part of this is it's psychology. Like you're changing the perception of Nebraska. The past half decade, it's heartbreaking losses in the same fashion, turnovers. They certainly had a ton of turnovers. This one was just a butt whooping from the start. Can you use that to your advantage, right? It's good to play football angry and ticked off. If you're Nebraska, you got to say that is absolutely not us and be hungry to go prove that against one of the best offenses in the country in the Buckeyes.
Well, they will certainly have their chance to do that. Again, that game in Columbus Saturday.